Jim Acosta, what did you think?
Yeah, Brooke, I mean, this was a big cave. I think this is one of the biggest tactical defeats for the president that we've seen in his political life. He created this box canyon for himself. Nancy Pelosi let him walk right into it, and now he's trying desperately to see his way out of it after watching on television this morning the havoc that a government shutdown, a protracted government shutdown, can wreak on the nation's aviation system, with all of those flights being delayed and so forth in the Northeast Corridor. I think that was weighing very heavily on what was happening over here at the White House. But as you heard at the very end of the president's comments there, he said that he is fully capable and prepared to shut down this government again if by February 15th we don't see some sort of agreement to get that wall down on the border with Mexico. Now, Brooke, I will tell you, standing here in the Rose Garden, this was pretty remarkable to watch, because as the president was moving through those prepared remarks, there were moments in which, and I suppose we know this because we've been following this man for some time now, he can't help himself and was going off of those prepared remarks, going off of that teleprompter, and at times ad-libbing about what he sees as a crisis on the border, talking about women having their mouths duct taped, at one point suggesting that if a wall is built on the southern border with Mexico, that the amount of drugs coming in would be cut, as he said, by a number that people don't really have a firm understanding of. And so the president was making some of these claims that he often makes when he talks about immigration, when he talks about the border in unscripted settings, and he was injecting some of those remarks, ad-libbing those remarks as he was reading off of the teleprompter here. So I think that shows you where the president's head is right now. He just can't give up on this wall. He just can't quit this wall. And I think that is why you're going to see, very possibly in the next 3 weeks, this country right back where we have been for the last 35 days, which is perhaps in the middle of a government shutdown because the president can't seem to get his way on the wall. Now, the other thing that was interesting to watch being here in the Rose Garden is off on the sidelines underneath the colonnade, over here leading into the West Wing. You can see the vice president, you can see Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law and senior advisor, cabinet officials, other top officials applauding as if this was some sort of victorious moment for the president. Yeah, celebration. That was just right out of Alice in Wonderland, Brooke.
Totally.
I mean, to see the White House and people inside the White House applauding the president during one of the biggest tactical defeats, strategic defeats of his political career, to me just felt like the upside down out of Stranger Things. It is just bizarre to see something like that happen. and they were looking jubilant before he even began his remarks. They were smiling and clapping and laughing and that sort of thing. And it goes to and this is something that we see day in and day out over here at the White House. There are just people here who are not dealing with reality. The reality on the outside world is that during a 35-day shutdown, people are suffering, they're crying, they're on the news talking about how they can't pay their bills and buy their insulin. And over here at the White House, they're smiling and clapping and congratulating themselves for a shutdown that just caused a great deal of agony across the country. And it was striking near the beginning of the president's remarks when he said, and he made this claim that there are government employees who have been getting through this just fine. He suggested that government employees are getting through this just fine. That just suggests that he's not looking at the real. When he looks outside the window of the Oval Office, he's not looking at the real world. And so that is why, if folks are wondering at home, could we be here in the exact same place 3 weeks from now? I think that's probably not a bad bet to make at this point. This president is hell-bent on getting a wall. And my sense of it is he'll sign this CR to get the government open again, but we might be right back in the same place 3 weeks from now, Brooke.
He can't quit the wall, so says Jim Acosta. Jim in the Rose Garden. Jim, thank you. You know, it is this sort of upside down world, David Chalian. But how do all these federal workers and the rest of us get right side up? I mean, obviously, we've been pointing out this is a deal he could have had 35 days ago. Like, you could have cut and copied the speech that we just heard and posted it back to December 22nd. So what now?
Which is why, as Dana was saying earlier, right, this is everything the Democrats asked for, and as she said, some Republicans. But we also have to remember, this is actually everything that all the Republicans and Democrats and President Trump agreed to before Christmas, before he completely reversed course. That's what this is. Extending funding for a limited period of time so that the debate over border security in the long run could be dealt with. That's actually what Mike Pence went and agreed with Mitch McConnell was the deal. And so it begs the question, how is this not all for naught? The entire 35-day period was completely for naught. And it is, so when the president says in his remarks in the Rose Garden today that this is going to provide an opportunity to have that debate, you just have to scratch your head and be like, that opportunity existed on December 22nd, and he was for it until he completely then rejected it. It just defies logic at all.
Totally.
Which is why I think Jim is right to note how devastating of a political defeat is. And one can only hope that some of those smiles and applause from the staff is because they understand how crushingly bad this government shutdown was, and they perhaps some of those smiles and applause are just because of the mere fact that the government will reopen and the pain will stop.
But for these federal workers, again, like that's what I always kind of come back to. And Carrie Cordero, I mean, of course, there are the ramifications of safety, and we've been talking to TSA folks and ATC folks. But you know, and I know that a lot of these people will get paid back. But are there long-term effects to this for these workers?
There absolutely are, Brooke. You know, I spent 13 years in government, and you can't just turn government on and off again, especially in the national security and homeland security space. There's investigations that are ongoing. There's work that's being done, intelligence being collected, sources that are being worked, all sorts of things that are taking place that you can't just turn it on and off. The other thing is there's a lot of mid-career folks in government who are going to think about leaving federal service. There's young people who are thinking about, well, maybe I won't go into federal service because it's just so, it used to be more stable, and now it's something that's unpredictable. So there's just so many aspects on the national security side, on the homeland security side, and as far as the long-term effects to the federal workforce that are going to outlive this shutdown, and then the uncertainty of there potentially being another one just a few weeks from now. There's going to be people who are going to turn in their retirement papers and who are going to leave government service in the middle of their career when they're just seasoned and expert in their field, because they're not going to be willing to put their family through this again.
Okay, so let's continue. I like the Stranger Things analogy from Jim Acosta. Like, let's say we're in this upside down world, Nia Malika Henderson, and you know, hopefully the government wants to write this. And so, all right, they reopen the government for 3 weeks. They try to get there together, and what if they don't? I'm pushing this forward. If this goes into national emergency territory, does that then, you know, who wins there, I guess? Is it the president because he then potentially would get the money for what he wants, this wall, and Democrats win because they get to say, see, we didn't cave?
You know, who knows in terms of that scenario, the national emergency, whether he's going to try to kind of move money around, as was something that was floated before. It looks like, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but it looks like any sort of declaration of a national emergency would face some court challenges. It also would defy logic in many ways, right? If there's a national emergency, and this was something that was being floated a couple of weeks ago, and the president decided not to do that. If something is a national emergency, you imagine that it's something pressing and imminent, and the idea that you can wait not only the first 35 days of this shutdown, but now 3 weeks, that'd be 50 or 60 days or so. It doesn't make, you know, it sort of doesn't jibe with this idea that there's a national emergency and an imminent threat to safety, even though, as you saw in that speech, Donald Trump is still trying to paint this portrait of lawlessness and chaos at the southern border. Women with duct tape over their mouths and faces in vans, turning left and right. I mean, this is one of these images that he keeps repeating. He seems to be obsessed with that notion of women being in vans and with duct tape over their mouths. But what was so striking about this today for me was this really was a picture of the president in full failure, right? I mean, here he was trying to paint himself as sort of the victor here, someone who's swooping in and having this deal. He's going to make sure that the federal employees get paid. He's going to make sure that this is a bill that comes up on the Senate and is passed. But he has failed at every turn around this. I mean, 35 days, he ends up with nothing. Nancy Pelosi has won every match. This is the president is essentially playing tiddlywinks while you have Nancy Pelosi really having a strategy here, basically saying this to the president that no negotiations over this wall. And we'll see. I think there will be some sort of negotiations, but we also know that Democrats are not going to fund this wall. I don't know how many times the president needs to hear that before he actually understands that. But I think after these 35 days, it should be pretty clear to him. But again, there he was with all of the kind of rhetoric that he's had for years and years about the dangers at the border. And so far, it hasn't worked to sway public opinion. If anything, public opinion is at an all-time high against him and against the wall.
And Brooke, it bears repeating what we said as soon as the president was over and it was done speaking. And that is, there is nothing that has changed in the past 35 days except incredible, excruciating pain that has been, felt by 800,000 workers, and then the ripple effects thereout.
Do we know when they will?
Nothing.
Do we know? I mean, I didn't hear anything definitive from Trump. Are you hearing anything about when they'll be paid?
I don't think we know the answer to that yet. As Kerry said, it's not as easy as you would think to turn on and off the spigots of government. They're supposed to be paid today. Today is a payday, so it might take a little while to do the retroactive pay. We're not sure the answer to that yet.
Okay.
Brooke, I would just add on the legal question of the national emergency issue that Nia was discussing. She's exactly right that the longer the shutdown went on and the longer period of time that goes on where Congress has an opportunity to debate the issues, the less likely it is possible to use that legal authority appropriately if he wants to invoke national security or national emergency authority. And I'll give you a benchmark. It took the U.S. Congress 45 days to pass the USA Patriot Act after 9/11, a true national security emergency. February 13th takes us beyond that point, beyond that 45 days from originally when this first shutdown started. So I think that the longer this period of time goes on and we get past February 4th, which is that 9/11 USA Patriot Act benchmark, the stronger the legal challenges against his use of emergency authority are going to be.
That is such a significant point. Let me thank all of you, because I woke up to what I thought would be the biggest story of the day, until this happened. Thanks to everyone for talking about the government reopening for 3 weeks, because coming up, a huge moment today in the special counsel Robert Mueller probe. This man, Roger Stone, a former associate to President Trump, was arrested early today and now faces charges including obstruction, giving false statements, witness tampering, an incredible scene as he left the courthouse today. What he's vowing to do next, we'll also take you inside the FBI raid on Roger Stone's home early this morning there in Florida, all caught on camera. You're watching CNN. We'll be right back. To the other huge story of the day, another member of President Trump's inner circle ensnared in the Mueller probe. 6 people have now been charged or convicted. Former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, Trump Deputy Campaign Chairman Rick Gates, Trump Campaign Chairman Paul Manafort, Trump campaign advisor George Papadopoulos, Trump's personal attorney Michael Cohen, and today, Trump's longtime friend, associate, first campaign advisor Roger Stone has now been added to the list. Stone is now out on a $250,000 bond after being arraigned in a Florida court on a slew of charges, among them obstruction, false statements, and witness tampering. Stone seemed to be loving every bit of the attention. The cameras focused right on him as he headed out of the courthouse, steps to address the allegations while giving a nod to Richard Nixon, who Stone became close with after working on his campaign and has his tattoo on his back. Here now is Roger Stone in his own words.
Worse than being talked about is not being talked about. I am falsely accused of making false statements during my testimony to the House Intelligence Committee. That is incorrect. At the crack of dawn, 29 FBI agents arrived at my home with 17 vehicles with their lights flashing when they could simply have contacted my attorneys, and I would have been more than willing to surrender voluntarily. They terrorized my wife, my dogs. I will plead not guilty to these charges. I will defeat them in court. There is no circumstance whatsoever under which I will bear false witness against the president, nor will I make up lies to ease the pressure on myself. I look forward to being fully and completely vindicated.
Roger Stone pausing to speak, answer questions. Sounds pretty chill all about it now, but as he said, the entire thing kicked off with this dramatic pre-dawn raid in his Fort Lauderdale home, caught by the FBI, carried out by the FBI, and seen in this exclusive CNN video. Meantime, in New York today, another group of agents could be seen carrying out boxes and evidence bags from Stone's apartment complex. But the headline here is this, and it is a big one, is that Stone is accused of seeking stolen emails from WikiLeaks that could hurt Trump's opponents in coordination with senior Trump campaign officials. So this is the first time prosecutors have alleged that there were additional people close to the then Republican candidate who were involved in this. And not surprisingly, Press Secretary Sarah Sanders dismissed the developments.
This has nothing to do with the president and certainly nothing to do with the White House. This is something that has to do solely with that individual and not something that affects us here in this building.
And there's just one more thing I want to point out here. Those FBI agents who took Stone into custody before dawn today, they were working without pay at the time of the arrest because of the government shutdown. So, Carrie Cordero is back with me. Chris Swecker is joining us. He's a former FBI Assistant Director for the Criminal Investigative Division. So, Carrie, but between the indictment, the Stone scene today, what was your biggest takeaway?
I think my biggest takeaway was that the indictment, I went through the indictment and I circled all the times that it indicated that Stone was in communication with multiple, that's plural, members of the Trump campaign, as he was going back and forth to his intermediaries involved with Organization 1 in the indictment, which we can assume is WikiLeaks. So in the past, when we've been talking about the case related to maybe Paul Manafort, the president's surrogates have been quick to say, well, that was just him. That didn't have anything to do with the campaign. In this indictment, what it makes clear is that Stone was in communication and talking and updating and getting direction from plural members of the Trump campaign.
Let me come back to you on that point, but Chris, over to you on what our CNN cameras captured earlier this morning in Fort Lauderdale. You know, his arrest at his home looked dramatically different than the others we've seen throughout this Russia investigation. Can you tell me why that was?
Yeah, well, first I'd say I can't tell who's happier to be indicted, Roger Stone or Michael Cohen. What you saw this morning was a pretty dramatic raid by the FBI, probably done the way they do raids to prevent the destruction of evidence, computer evidence, digital evidence, probably. That wasn't, and there is some concern when you have that type of warrant that someone might react and not know that they're police and might react violently, so that would explain some of the armor and the SWAT team and that sort of thing. But this is what you do in a bare knuckles investigation when a defendant doesn't cooperate, becomes very obstinate. I've served under Director Mueller. I know him well. He's not going to do this kind of raid unless he has significant equity in this. In other words, that there's some good reason to do it. He's looking for some very important evidence in there, and he didn't want to see it destroyed.
The arrest, though, Chris, and the indictment on the very same day, is that unusual?
No, that's not terribly unusual. When you in this type of investigation, they do a lot of pre-planning, and this is a culmination of a plan that probably was set in motion weeks and weeks ago.
Okay. And then, Carrie, when we saw Roger Stone, you know, on those front steps of the courthouse with his lawyer behind him, he said, I am one of Trump's oldest friends, and he said, I will not testify against the president.
Yeah, well, there's the pardon play, right?
Thank you. That's why I was like, it's like he's talking to Trump.
That's the pardon play. This is a president who has demonstrated already in his first 2 years in office that he's willing to use pardons. He's talked about pardons publicly in the context of this broader Russia investigation. And so that was Roger Stone saying, I'm not the rat, and, you know, I should get good treatment from the president. So he's communicating with the president through the airwaves. The fact is that this indictment shows that there is a lot of evidence using text, using emails that the investigators have. And so Roger Stone knows that the investigators have all of that evidence, and they probably, as Mr. Swecker said, were able to gather more evidence this morning.
And also gathering evidence, Chris, not only his home in Fort Lauderdale, but his home, his apartment in New York has apparently also been searched. What else are they looking for?
Well, yeah, in this digital age, establishing probable cause for this type of search, you can search pretty much anywhere. There's computer media, there's mobile devices, and if there's internet service in a particular location, that's enough to get you in the house to search for digital evidence. There may be paper documents they're looking for. There might be other types of financial records they're looking for, written records. People still do have written documents. So I just believe that this is, you don't see the direct connection with Russia yet, but I think there's a very deliberate strategy that former Director Mueller is using, and I think in the end this will all come together in a fairly significant indictment that does tie that loose end up, which is the direct connection between what we know is Russian interference.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Jenna.
This is CNN Breaking News.
You are watching CNN. I'm Brooke Baldwin. Thank you so much for being with me. Whew, what a day it has been. Within the span of just a couple of hours, 3 major breaking news stories. The president's longtime associate and first campaign advisor, as we were just discussing, Roger Stone, has been indicted for lying, obstruction, and witness tampering. There have been monster delays at U.S. airports today, as well as our air traffic control system has reached this breaking point on staffing, which led in part to what we just saw moments ago, the president of the United States announcing there from the Rose Garden this short-term deal with Democrats to put an end to the shutdown mess. Keywords for now. And so that is where we begin this hour. Moments ago, the president announcing a deal to end the longest government shutdown in U.S. history. It is only temporary. The deal reached with Democrats only reopens the government for 3 weeks to give both sides more time to work out a permanent solution. The big announcement coming as federal workers miss their second paycheck on day 35 of the shutdown, and as the president is still pushing for some type of wall or barrier at the southern border.
As everyone knows, I have a very powerful alternative, but I didn't want to use it at this time. Hopefully it will be unnecessary. I want to thank all of the incredible federal workers and their amazing families who have shown such extraordinary devotion in the face of this recent hardship. You are fantastic people. You are incredible patriots.
Here is what Democratic sources say this deal entails. Funding the government through February 15th, the hopes of figuring out a permanent solution. Again, key here, no money for a border wall right now, but it does provide funds for border security, and it also includes a back pay provision for furloughed employees. So let's start with CNN White House correspondent Abby Phillip. And Abby, I noted this before. It's like it was so, I use the word shameful, to hear the applause from members there at the White House applauding this man being the president of the United States, who is the reason for his $5.7 billion for this wall, for the government shutdown.
Yeah, Brooke, it was incredibly discordant to hear that from a peanut gallery of White House and administration staffers who had gathered in the Rose Garden to hear the president and then applaud him on his way out as he begins to close what is an incredibly sad chapter in this country's history. The longest shutdown ever, 35 days, federal workers going unpaid. And at the end of the day, the deal that is going to be voted on today is the same deal that could have been voted on 35 days ago. It could have been voted on Tuesday before the deadline for federal workers to get their paychecks by today, but it wasn't. And I think President Trump clearly acknowledged that he is not getting his border wall in this particular deal, but in the process of talking about what Democrats are describing as a major cave on the president reiterated so many misleading statements about what's going on the border, some outright falsehoods about what's going on the border to continue to press his case for that border wall. Now, we have 3 weeks in which we will see perhaps real negotiations happening. Now, remember, Democrats have been saying they don't even want to talk to the president about border security until the government is reopened. So this could signal real talks back and forth about this issue. But the president left that Rose Garden by saying this, that he would either shut down the government again on February 15th, or he would use executive action to build the wall if he isn't given the wall by congressional Democrats. So there is a very real possibility that in 3 weeks we could be right back where we started on this shutdown here at the White House, with no progress being made and the government being about to be shut down. Brooke, one of the things that has been weighing on this White House has been all of the damage that has been caused by the shutdown. But today, when everybody woke up to and went about their day, hearing all this news from the air traffic control system being crippled by the shutdown, the stress being placed on federal workers, that was one of the main reasons, according to our sources, that this pressure really started to really weigh on the president, forcing him into the position that he is in right now. There is a real question, though, about whether the president is going to be able to get more out of Democrats in the next 3 weeks than he has been able to get up until this point. Democrats have no reason to give the president his wall, especially considering that he has caved on this, he caved on the State of the Union, and they have shown that they can get the upper hand from a president who has not actually in his political life seen this kind of defeat before. Brooke.
Abby, thank you very much. At the White House, let's expand the conversation. With me now, CNN chief political analyst Gloria Borger and Eliza Collins, politics reporter for USA Today. Gloria, is this a total Trump cave?
Well, yes. When you think about this could have been done weeks ago, that the Democrats have been talking about reopening the government, and then let's have a discussion about some kind of immigration reform. We'll do it that way. And the president said, no, I need money for the wall. And he didn't get money for the wall today. What was striking to me was that the president somehow today, and my notes are not verbatim, but he did say that the Democrats have finally acknowledged that having barriers, walls, fences are some kind of important part of the solution. I haven't heard that from Democrats. They have in the past voted for certain kinds of barriers, as we know, but that's not a part of this new discussion. So I don't know where he's getting that from. And also, he hung out this notion that I'm hanging this emergency authority over your head, which, as you were discussing in the last segment, is very questionable legally. And that's an issue for conservatives as well, because a lot of conservatives think it's an abuse of presidential authority.
Yeah, as Carrie Cordero was pointing out, the clock is ticking on the viability of that. And it was Trump's phrase, I have a powerful alternative.
Yeah.
I won't use it now, ... So we'll see what happens in 3 weeks. Eliza, to you, right now, as everyone's reacting to this, apparently right-wing media is going off over this. How will the Sean Hannitys of the world defend Trump on this?
I don't know if they can. On my way over here, I was texting with a conservative who was close to the White House, and he said that this stabbed the base in the heart. I mean, This was Trump's biggest promise to the base. They really wanted it, and he's completely failed to do that, and he failed to do it to Nancy Pelosi, who is, of course, their favorite foe. So it's really interesting. I mean, I was just at the Capitol. I talked to Senator Kevin Cramer, who is a Republican senator. He voted no yesterday on the Democratic bill, which was essentially the same thing, just a different date. And today said he would support this. And basically his reasoning was that the president was going to support it today. But I asked how he could defend it to the base, and he said there's no question the base is going to be upset. So I'm not sure how the Sean Hannitys of the world are able to defend it.
Stabbing the heart of the base, which is so much of what, as we've always discussed, matters so much to this president. You have these 800,000 or so federal workers. You have, of course, a lot of these contractors who won't be getting back pay. They're all like, You know, at least for some of them, when are we getting paid? That's still a big question mark. And Gloria, I go back to, again, 35 days this thing has gone on. You know, that he is not getting a penny for his wall. And I can't imagine that these federal workers are like, what was all this for?
Right,
and they're come of this.
Right, and they're also thinking, what's going to happen in 3 weeks?
Totally.
You know, we could be back at square one here in 3 weeks, and despite the president's homage to the strength of federal workers, which we have not heard a lot over the past 3 weeks from this president or his cabinet, he went out of his way to do that today. We know that the Democrats are not going to give on the wall, and that the president is going to be getting a lot of input from conservatives about how he messed this up. And so we don't know where we are going to be in 3 weeks. Maybe they will come up with some kind of a compromise that they couldn't get. But if that involves Dreamers, for example, we know where the Democrats are and we know where the president is, and they're never going to agree on that. Then the base would really get angry. So I'm trying to think in my mind, where do they go on this? Where can they go? And maybe the national emergency is the place they go, or the president goes, but that doesn't solve the issue either, because it winds up in court.
Eliza, who's the key lawmaker to watch behind the scenes moving this whole thing forward?
I think we've got to watch Mitch McConnell. I mean, he stayed quiet for a really long time. In December, the Senate unanimously passed a bill very similar to this one, and the president said he wasn't going to sign it. And so McConnell basically said, all right, hands off. Deal with the Democrats. And then we saw him come back on the scene this week. He held those 2 votes yesterday. One was the Democratic bill, very similar to this one. The other was the president's proposal. Both failed. The Democratic bill got a few more votes. They got 6 Republicans on their side. But McConnell, basically, people close to McConnell have said that was a message. He was trying to say, look, neither work. We've got to come to the table. And then we saw real movement. So I think watching McConnell on this, of course, the Freedom Caucus, the conservatives have a lot of influence on the president. They were in the White House when President Trump decided he was going to shut down the government. So I think we need to be watching them on this. So far, they've stuck by him. Mark Meadows today was said, let's see how Democrats do in these next 3 weeks. But they are very tapped into the base. And so I think we need to be watching Mitch McConnell, who is sort of understands Congress very well and what deals can get done. And then the conservatives whispering in Trump's other ear to just play to his base.
I also think Lindsey Graham is somebody you need to watch, because he's sort of the newest Trump whisperer, right? Took the words right out of my mouth. So he is. But don't forget, Lindsey Graham is somebody who way back in the day signed on to comprehensive immigration reform, has always been for it, which is not where the president is, but who has been talking about a compromise. And so I think he could end up being some kind of a go-between. But then again, he's not very popular with conservatives on this issue. But maybe he'll play a few rounds of golf with the president in Florida, and they can figure it out. I don't know.
Well, let's hope that is a game of golf that actually results in something here for everyone involved. Gloria and Eliza, ladies, thank you so much. In addition to the news with the government reopening for a hot minute here, we have the other huge story of the day involving Roger Stone. Now, the 6th associate of President Trump to be charged by special counsel Robert Mueller. We have a reaction from the White House and what this means for President Trump, both legally and politically. Back in a moment. Welcome back. It's Friday. You're watching CNN. I'm Brooke Baldwin. Wowza. Let me... So we're talking about Roger Stone today, and Roger Stone is a longtime Trump advisor associate. He is now out on a $250,000 bond after being arraigned in a Florida court on a slew of charges, among them obstruction, false statements, and witness tampering. And here he was later this morning walking out of court.
I will plead not guilty to these charges. I will defeat them in court. I believe this is a politically motivated investigation, but I have made it clear I will not testify against the president.
It all started with a dramatic raid this morning at his home in Fort Lauderdale, seen here in the CNN exclusive video, carried out, we should mention, by FBI agents who were not being paid at the time because of the government shutdown. But the main takeaway is this, and it's a huge one, is that Roger Stone is accused of seeking stolen emails from WikiLeaks that could hurt Trump's opponents in coordination with senior Trump campaign officials. This is the first time prosecutors have alleged that there were additional people close to the Republican candidate who were involved. We don't know their names, but we do know at least one person's actions. From the indictment, let me read this section for you now. After the first release of DNC emails, a senior Trump official was directed to contact Stone about any additional releases and what other damaging information Organization One being WikiLeaks. The big question now is who in July of 2016 could have been considered a senior Trump campaign official. So with me now, CNN legal analyst Ellie Honig and Jennifer Rogers. Ellie was also former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, and Jennifer is a former federal prosecutor. So let's just dive right in. To you first, just between this moment, in front of the courthouse with Roger Stone and that entire indictment, what is your biggest takeaway?
The biggest takeaway to me now is that no collusion is just a straight up empty slogan. We now know for sure that the Russian effort to hack the DNC and to put those emails out through WikiLeaks has now landed squarely in the upper reaches of the Trump campaign. There is no getting around that. If you look at this indictment, we know every word that Robert Mueller puts in writing is correct, locked in, and for a purpose. And you can say no collusion. He hasn't been charged with collusion. Collusion's not even a federal crime. This puts the hacking effort right in the campaign.
The line, the was directed, the was directed, senior Trump campaign official was directed to contact, do you think that could be the most damning line of this whole thing?
Well, it's the one that most puts Trump in the middle of this, right? Because who could possibly be directing senior campaign officials? Really, no one other than the candidate, right? So it really does read as if Trump was on board with Roger Stone's contact with WikiLeaks, getting the dirt from them, getting specific dirt from them on topics that they then wanted to use in their campaign against Hillary Clinton.
Which we were talking earlier in my office, because I always try to avoid passive voice, right? And this was written in passive voice in the sense that it said directed, what was directed. It didn't say someone directed senior Trump campaign official to reach out to, and that was, you think that's purposeful.
I do. Look, we all, Jennifer and I, hate passive voice. You do too.
Yeah.
When you do an indictment, you name the defendant, Roger Stone here, and everybody else gets a label. Individual one, executive one, campaign official one. And by phrasing this in the passive voice, it allowed Mueller to sort of sidestep that. Yeah, he didn't have to say person one or official one or candidate one or anything like that. But I also want to pick up on something that Jennifer said. The coordination here was not sort of incidental or by the by. It was strategic. If we look at the emails that are laid out in this indictment, they are talking about where do we make these leaked emails count the most. There's a part where they're talking about, let's stress the theme that Hillary is not of sound mind anymore, right? There's a part where they're talking about, we want emails from a specific date range, August 10th to 30th, preferably the 20th. They're looking for something specific. Mm-hmm. There's a point where they're saying Hillary's people are pushing back. These are strategically coordinated emails and texts that are now linked from the campaign to the Russians.
On the emails and the texts, everyone says Mueller knows all, right? Everyone keeps saying that he has all the receipts, all the emails, all the texts, all the documents. One excerpt from the indictment seems to prove that. Prosecutors note that Stone was in the possession of emails and texts about the hacked documents at the exact time he lied and told Congress he had no knowledge of such emails and texts. So my question would be, why lie about something that is demonstrably false?
That is so often the question that we ask ourselves as you're doing these
like
pieces.
You're like,
why
hey,
are people lying?
We got the email right here.
He's sitting there saying, there were no written communications between me and my conduit, and yet there are dozens and dozens and dozens, and he must know that these electronic records don't just disappear. He didn't set fire to them and put them in the fireplace, and they're gone forever. So, it's hard to know, except that at a certain time, before his testimony at least, this was all part of this big bluster campaign that Roger Stone was carrying on, right? He was, saying, oh, yes, it was me. I knew all about this WikiLeaks stuff, and then he said, no, I didn't. But the moment he goes before Congress, we're now in a different boat. And I do want to say, I want to give some credit to the representatives who asked the right questions here. So often those folks, unfortunately, don't really know how to phrase questions in the right way. They make people like Ellie and me cringe. This time they did. They asked the right questions. They got the answers that they needed to bring these false statements charges. And that's really, really important because that's the only time that he testified and he was subject to those kinds of penalties.
Stone is a weird bird, right?
He is?
Yes. I mean, we were talking about some of his sort of personal peccadillos.
Yes.
But, everyone should go back and read Jeffrey Toobin's interview of him 10 years
Yes.
ago in The New Yorker. It's brilliant. But remember, Roger Stone's personal motto is admit nothing, deny everything, launch counterattack. And we saw it on the courthouse steps already.
The Nixon tattoo, the loving the cameras, the mention of the Godfather, probably the last thing you would want to quote and look up to. And if you're doing whatever you're doing, let me just thank you both right now, Ellie and Jennifer. Appreciate you walking through this indictment with me today. So that's one of the huge stories. Of course, the other big story, the breaking news, the president and Democrats making this short-term deal now to reopen the government. This is what we just got from the president speaking at the White House. Officials there telling CNN one catalyst for the president backing down was all the chaos earlier this morning at some of the nation's busiest airports, widespread staffing issues that forced total ground stops for a period of time. So we'll get reaction from 2 air traffic controllers who should be getting paychecks sometime soon. Deal reached between the president and Democrats to reopen the government, at least for the next 3 weeks. So why today and why now? According to a White House official, the massive delays we're seeing today at several major airports across the country did play a key role in the president's decision. The delays, direct result of the shutdown thanks to staffing issues with air traffic controllers. They are the men and women working without pay to keep our skies safe, responsible for all of the planes you see in the air right now. They are the eyes and ears for pilots on the ground, juggling countless flights each and every day in an extremely stressful job. So with me now, Trish Gilbert, the Executive Vice President of the National Air Traffic Controllers Association, and Air Traffic Controller Jim Marinetti, who is also Southern Regional Vice President of the National Air Traffic Controllers Association. So first and foremost, thank you so much for what you do. We were talking just quickly, just for perspective, if you take NyQuil, you can't be an air traffic controller for 2 days. That is how on point and how much of a perfectionist you really have to be to do this job. You guys saw the president's announcement, the applause at the White House for the government reopening for 3 weeks. You called this irresponsible when we talked the other day. How did you feel about watching the president today?
I was relieved. I was relieved to hear that the men and women are going to get the support structure that they need back in the facilities. We're going to start hiring again, training again, getting our people paid first and foremost, figuring out who really is going to leave the profession, who we can get back. I'm concerned it's for 3 weeks. I hope that they've seen that the harm that they've done, not just to the aviation system, but to this country with all of the other critical components of government being partially shut down, they don't do it again in 3 weeks. I hope they never do it again. We need to figure out a way that doesn't happen. I don't know what that looks like, but this can't happen again.
What kind of harm has been done in 35 days?
There's been an immense amount of harm on such a large, we are the largest, safest, most efficient air traffic control system in the world, the gold standard that everyone else looks to. And it's going to take some time. The FAA Academy in Oklahoma City has been closed for 35 days. Those are classes that are going to be hard to make up. The hiring, the training that has not been accomplished will be difficult. The ripple effect for that, it could take years to catch up. We were just catching up the 30-year low of air traffic control staffing in this country, working collaboratively with the FAA to make this work, and this has really set us back.
Have either of you gotten any indication, as the government will be reopening for 3 weeks, when the controllers will be paid?
No, I mean, we have a great relationship with the FAA, our employer, and we've been in constant conversation with them about making sure that we keep the system as safe as we can during this shutdown without all the critical components that we were missing. And I think they will do everything they can to get some money in the pockets of the people that have been working since before Christmas without pay. So we count on them to give them something, and then we'll figure out all the details later, because there's going to be a lot of pieces to put back together to get things back to normal.
So with all the pieces still not together, when will you all be sort of back to normal, like all running full speed ahead?
Well, running full speed ahead is a relative term. It's not just air traffic controllers. There are aviation safety professionals all across the country. And we have to think about the contractors that have somewhat been ignored through this entire process that we rely on inherently to help us through various modernization projects, technological projects.
Who won't be getting back pay?
That is a true statement. So there's going to be a lot of, it's going to take a true collaborative effort to move this forward, and let's do it the right way. I do believe the relationships that we have built over the past 8-10 years within the FAA show promise for us moving into the future, but it's going to take some time. The next several months will be key.
You mentioned this off the top. Just last quick question: how worried are you that we are going to be exactly where we are in 3 weeks, or how hopeful?
We can't be there again. We have to be responsible. We have to figure out a way to get in the room together and work these things out. We cannot hold people hostage while you try and work something out. Whatever the issue is, they need to be leaders. They need to be leaders.
You feel like workers have been hostages for the last 35
Absolutely.
Your face just told me all I needed to know.
Absolutely, Brooke. I mean, a crisis was caused where there was none 1 month ago, and it was done on the backs of federal workers in a safety-sensitive position where we are expected to be right. We save lives every day. And to play with the public trust like that just really isn't fair to anybody, and it's not safe.
Jim and Trish, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moments from now, speaking of this whole shutdown, Democratic leaders Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, they are expected to hold a news conference. At the same time, we're told the White House press pool has just been called into the Oval Office. Stand by for that. Also, Roger Stone has long said he expected to be indicted by the special counsel's office, but not quite like this. CNN was there in the wee hours of the morning, capturing exclusive video of these FBI agents arresting him this morning, guns drawn, raiding his home. But leaving court today, Roger Stone loving the cameras. The only way, Roger Stone.
The only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about.